feature presentation.
Welcome back to another untitled TIFF review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside. He's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved. Eric Marchin.
I can't. I can't. I can't. I can't.
Today we are reviewing Tobias Lindholm's The Good Nurse, starring Jessica Chastain and Eddie Redmayne. Didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it did. Eric, how are you?
Matt, I'm good. It's we're at the end of October, the end
It's
of
still
spooky
reviewing TIFF
season.
movies.
Still rigging them out. The world is still going round, news of Tobin Bell coming back to the Saw franchise, and just breaking news, Amy Redford's Roost, which is now being called When It Comes Around, has been picked up by IFC Films. If
IFC
related.
didn't expect IFC to pick it up. I guess that kind of tracks like IFC Midnight, kind of like it's not Midnight, it's just plain
Just
IFC.
IFC, yeah.
Interesting. Probably the worst movie we saw at the festival.
Yeah. And
So
not
hey,
sticking with the title Roost. So
but today we're not talking about Roost, which did we reviewed it. You can go listen to that
no, we
review,
didn't
right?
review
No,
it.
we
We
didn't.
talked about it in our
Oh.
wrap-up
This is
episode.
This is the thing, everyone. So we watched a lot of movies at TIFF, and it's hard to do a podcast while you're still, watching movies at TIFF and can't lug around, a podcasting studio. So we're still trickling out reviews from TIFF. I mean, we're recording them afterwards, and now they're coming out as the films are coming out. So it's an interesting kind of look back at how we felt of these movies, back at the festival. You, Eric, have seen some of these movies now a second time because you've either done interviews or reviewed them for Rogers and things like that too. Some of them for myself, same thing, but it depends on what the movie is. But we'll still have TIFF reviews, and they'll be branded TIFF reviews for probably the next year. So until next TIFF. So we'll see.
So when
But
Roost
today,
comes out, we'll have that review
yeah.
ready to go. But you will have to change the
Mhm.
title for it.
Oh, right, because I already made the thumbnails
Yeah.
where, am I branding all of this TIFF stuff just because I don't wanna go change the thumbnails? But we
Yes.
did see all of these movies at TIFF, and I
Yeah.
feel like giving attribution of where we saw them and the context that we saw them in, I think is important. So we saw this, near the end of the festival, at Roy Thompson Hall. It is a Netflix film. It'll be released, October 26th. So by the time you're listening to this, it's probably already up on Netflix. It's had a very short theatrical release as well. Eric, you've now seen the movie twice, I
Yes.
believe, right? And you interviewed Tobias Lindholm,
I
which
sure
everyone can go
did.
check out on Rogers
I think
TV.
it's like 3 minutes
Um,
and 25
I
seconds.
love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Love those. You literally ask one question, and
Yeah.
it's done. Yeah.
He was
That's
very
so
nice
cool.
though,
Yeah.
and his answer was thoughtful, and Tobias Lindholm, for people maybe that aren't familiar with him, is a Danish director who is usually kind of best known as a writer first, and has worked with Thomas Vinterberg. He co-wrote Another Round,
Good
but
movie.
also directed a couple films, A Hijacking and A War, and this is his first English language film, but also it's the first movie he's worked with that isn't based on a script that he wrote in any capacity whatsoever. It's written by Kirsty Wilson Cairns, who wrote 1917 and co-wrote Last Night in Soho with Edgar Wright. So there's an interesting kind of outsider perspective on sort of the look at like sort of hospitals in the medical industry from the point of view that is, a European filmmaker, a European voice. And this is based on a true story, where they're adapting it from a novel that was written by Charles Graeber, also called The Good Nurse, to the film. It's from the point of view of Amy Lochran, who's played by Jessica Chastain. She works at Parkfield Memorial Hospital in New Jersey, circa 2003. And Eddie Redmayne's character, who again is a real life serial killer, Charlie Cullen, is brought on staff to kind of do the rounds, but mysteriously patients start dying. And that's when the police procedural aspect of the story kicks in, and you have Noah Emmerich and Nnamdi Asmawa coming in to kind of play the detective roles and investigating it, and sort of being blocked by bureaucracy on the hospital end. Kim Dickens plays the risk manager for the hospital, and what you have essentially isn't a serial killer film, but more a police procedural and character study mixed in with a film that is showing you and telling you in a subtle way, I think, for the most part, but it's still upfront about it, that these hospitals were as complicit with, you know, the murders because they kept allowing, this guy to continually apply for jobs at different hospitals, and they never kind of, said, they never reported him to the police. They never reported him to other hospitals, and he was allowed to go from one to another. And so we'll probably actually be talking a lot about this, not only in this review, but even in Holy Spider, where the serial killer themselves is not maybe as cunning or sophisticated or smart as they let on to be. It's more so the institution that continues to protect them and enable them in a way that, when you're watching this movie, you realize that, okay, well, this situation could have been dealt with swiftly and quick enough to kind of, apprehend him and deal with it. But because the system is the way it is, they don't want any liability. So the hospitals are basically as guilty as Charlie Cullen in
Yeah,
this
and because
case.
hospitals in the US are run as for-profit organizations, it's, a victim of
Yeah.
capitalism, just like in many other places where it's more interested in protecting itself because it doesn't, and its shareholders and whoever, you know, money first, essentially, which is how most businesses run, which is why we see
Profits over
profits over people
patients.
is the perfect thing, and patience in this situation. So it's unfortunately something we see way too often in many large organizations and businesses in the entire world, not just the United States. But it's really kind of despicable, and obviously it's very horrible what he's doing. It's the most heinous thing, but like on top of that, there is an interesting thing to be said there about how these hospitals treated this and kind of swept it under the rug and just went like, if this comes out and people find out that we allowed this to happen, our hospital could go under, or we could be ruined, kind of thing. And then they just kind of go fire him and move on, and that's really really fucked up. But the movie itself, I thought was pretty good. Like, again, it's a pretty solid procedural kind of thriller, like with a good performance from Jessica Chastain. I was surprised from that kind of police procedural element, which I wasn't expecting to be a part of this movie. I don't know what I necessarily was expecting. But it's one of those kind of, and it's kind of perfect to be on Netflix, to be honest. Like, it is one of those movies that you throw on a weekend, on a Friday or Saturday, and you kind of know the true story based on reading some of it over the last however many years. And, it will hit you for some of the reasons that Eric and I just mentioned, from how the hospital swept it under the rug, how he was doing it, and how he was just a total sociopath. I think from a negative standpoint, I think we both probably, Eric, you can go more into this, but I think it's someone we don't really care for, and this doesn't really help, is Eddie Redmayne, where, I think he is well cast to a certain extent to play kind of a monotone sociopath, except monotone, I say, until he gets his big Eddie Redmayne moment where he's like a Kermit flailing his arms in the air. um I don't know. Like, he's someone who never quite clicks for me in anything. And when we talk about, on recent reviews, like acting, someone who's just fucking acting, and you're like, who's trying so goddamn hard and it doesn't feel effortless, and you can never kind of lose yourself in their performance, where Chastain is great at that, where, I lose myself and I don't see, Jessica Chastain. I see the characters that she plays. With Eddie Redmayne, I feel like in anything, and especially even in this, I just see Eddie Redmayne, and it's just like whether what accent he's doing, his inflection, the way he's kind of overperforming, and I feel like I see that throughout this whole movie. So that kind of hinders the movie a bit. Um, but it didn't ruin it for me. Where I just found this kind of a pretty mildly enjoyable is a weird word, but like, it is an engaging procedural throughout the entire runtime, and I thought it was solid, like decent.
Yeah, it has enough intrigue to kind of keep you going, but also I think again centering it on Amy and not Charlie. You know, in the last few years there has been conversations when it comes to how serial killers are portrayed in film and television, specifically stuff on Netflix, with the Ryan Murphy Jeffrey Dahmer series, with Evan Peters recently, and even the Zac Efron Ted Bundy movie, where they're kind of turning them into these weird like folk heroes or kind of morbid fascinations, and it's very disrespectful to the families of the victims, and just the idea of it's a tricky kind of way to kind of get inside the mind of somebody, where you're trying to find a reason for why they did what they did. And with this movie, I think one of the strongest aspects, especially rewatching it, the creepiest thing about Eddie Redmayne's character is that it doesn't try to find that reason why. It uses that more so as a way to keep you engaged with the material, because you'll never know the true reason why he did what he did. Only he will ever know that as the answer. And it does kind of give you some hints to like, okay, well, when his mother died in a hospital, the body was lost for a few hours before they found it. Maybe there was something there, but it never tries to tell you directly like, oh, this is the reason why, like this is his psych profile 101. It's more so on Amy, who the narrative is framed within like this 4-month window of them becoming friends and working together, but then slowly but surely she comes to realize that what he is doing is unspeakable, and then she starts working with the detectives outside of the hospital's reach and knowledge to kind of um, apprehend him and get the evidence they need to kind of build a case. And then with that 4-month window, the framing of it is actually really quite ingenious, because you have this relationship kind of building rather quickly for four
Yeah.
months but part of it as well is because of Amy Lochran going through her own health issues, with her having cardiomyopathy. And so with that, I think that you're not getting, like a biopic that's cradle to the grave kind of story. It's just in this one moment of time in the early 2000s, and the way it's shot, it's very overcast and gray. It's removed in that kind of observational way that we talked about even with something like Tar, where it's less about kind of telling you and more so showing you how even people that are working for hospitals or medical institutions of any sort are also struggling. A nurse who doesn't have
Healthcare,
health
yeah.
benefits because she's still kind of on a probation period, and like that's a really interesting point that it's making. And then even just like one you know checkup or a consultation costs nearly a
That she has to
thousand
split
dollars
on
and
multiple credit cards and things like that.
yeah, and that kind of makes you think like, again, as Canadians, Canada is far from a perfect country, but our healthcare at this point in time is a much better system than the US and a lot of European
For the masses,
healthcare.
for sure, yeah,
Fac-
because there are
yeah, and
our
so
own problems with our own healthcare system and, like, hospital wait times and just the quality of care in some of these hospitals, but I get that in the hospitals in the US, you probably get better care, but that comes at a price and at a premium, right? Where you'd probably rather
yeah,
be like, "Well, I wanna get the care." Maybe it's, unfortunate that wait times are hella long or, not enough beds is a huge issue, but like just certain kind of shitty things in our system. But at least unless you can
understaffed.
at least you can get the care, right? Like, we're not gonna
Yeah.
turn someone away because they can't afford it, which is, yeah, wild as a nurse, right? Who works in the hospital that would help you, but she has to keep it hidden because she doesn't wanna be fired, if they find out and stuff like that, which is wild, which is another interesting kind of nugget that's in there underneath this kind of guise of a serial killer movie.
Yeah, and again, like, it's one of those films that I think has a pretty good balance in how it kind of goes between following Amy's story, but then bringing in the detectives who are getting blocked by the hospitals. And I really love Noah Emmerich as the sergeant detective. He's always good in whatever he does, and like you just kind of get that kind of weary real world kind of,
Oh, yeah,
you
he's
know,
he's great, yeah.
credibility. And yeah, and again, like, it's not, I think maybe one of the strengths is also the film's weakness, which is how subtle it is at times, where it's a perfectly well made, well paced, put together procedural, but it's almost to its detriment, where you're watching it and it's like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah,
You know, like it's well done. It's almost like, again, and I don't mean this as a negative, but it kind of feels like a really well made TV movie and less of like a feature
right.
film. And it doesn't. It's not that it's doesn't look good or it doesn't. You know, it's not appropriate in its tone or style, but it just kind of feels and looks like a TV movie of
And
the
that's why it's
week.
kinda
And I
perfect
think
for
when you are,
Netflix, though.
yeah, and I think when you are taking something that's, you know, based on a true story and making an adaptation, you're always going to get the, you know, end credit title
Yeah.
scroll or you know, the kind of like the notes, and that kind of also makes it kind of feel like a TV movie of the week a little bit. And then, you know, I'm happy that someone like Tobias Lindholm made this, and Christy Wilson Cairns, um, because originally Darren Aronofsky was going to direct this, or he was looking at this to direct, in his company, Protozoa Films is a production company on the film. I think he kind of would have gone the route of having the perspective on Charlie more so than anything else. And there are some questions I still had watching it a second time around, like how close were Amy and Charlie? Because there is this conversation that Charlie is also a serial dater, where like he dates people that he's working closest with to kind of like, you know, kind of hide a little bit in plain
Yeah.
sight. And he's, you know, like there's even this conversation of like, you know, one of his past partners who he has children with, you know, is was also, you know, reporting him for harassment and things like that. So, you know, the obvious red flags are there, and it's like it it's one of those things where it's like the hospital knew or should have known, and the past hospitals should have known, and they didn't. And you know, this guy ended up killing well over reported, like I think it was only, you know, like maybe
Which
90
is
confirmed, but like,
absolutely wild.
but
Yeah.
over 400
Possible.
are possible. And it's just like, you know, like that could have been stopped at the first hospital. But it's the complicity. It reminds you a little bit of the Catholic Church, where it's like, okay, well, we have, you know, this priest that has been sexually molesting kids. Let's just, instead of, you know, having
Addressing
him
this,
pay,
yeah.
and we'll just remove him and put him in another pastor, or we'll, you know, have him go into a Catholic version of, you know, reform, or something like that, or like a, you know, a detox clinic,
Because
and
this would
then
look
we'll put him
bad on the
back in
church
another.
if people found out, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and we'll just put him in another place, and we'll kind of like brush it under the rug.
Which is it
And
happens
so,
in so many organizations, man. Hockey Canada, we
yeah,
brought up, recently when we were talking about hockey and something, right? Like, they're going through a huge
yeah,
controversy right now, and we're not again, any organization, not even necessarily for-profit organizations or things like that, like, I mean, Catholic Church is basically for profit, and so is Hockey Canada, I guess, but, like,
yeah,
um
they just don't have to pay taxes because
yeah,
it's a
mhm.
religion.
So it happens way too often, and I think it is a really interesting subject matter, and they do touch on it here a little bit. We just wish they kind of maybe went a little deeper on that. Like it kind of just scratches the surface. Yeah, I think the movie
But it is some of the best
totally.
stuff in the movie too, and I think, like, Kim Dickens, like, knowing there's a moment where she, like, truly knows that she sold her soul to the devil and, working with these
Yeah,
lawyers to keep the hospital, um, uh, clean of any liability, and it's like you see it on her face in this final moment where it's like, I'm literally as bad as the serial killer,
hmm
and maybe worse because, again, they could have
could
done
have saved
something.
people. I'm gonna give the
Yeah.
movie. I forget what I gave it. I think like I'm in that 3.35 territory. I think I've softened on it, so I'm probably gonna go to that 3 territory just from memory because like it's not necessarily a movie I'm going to ever revisit. I mildly enjoyed my time with it. I don't know if it's even a movie that I'm gonna like go, hey, you should watch this. It's just like, oh, if you watch it, you're not gonna dislike it, I don't think. Maybe on depending on your thoughts on Eddie Redmayne and stuff like that. But it's a perfectly okay movie to throw on Netflix. Like if you're looking for something with, you know, star power, true story, serial killers are weirdly popular now. Like Eric already mentioned some of the other ones that sensationalize them a little bit more. But yeah, I think a 3 out of 5. It's decent.
Yeah, I'm also going to give it a 3 out of 5. It's conscientious true crime genre filmmaking, and you have a good filmmaker, you have a decent screenwriter. Chastain, I think, gives a better performance here than she does in The Eyes of Tammy Faye. I think she's really good at
Yeah.
procedurals, like even something like Zero Dark 30, where you know the proactive quality of the character that she's playing and trying to resolve or find a way to solve a
hmm
situation. There's something about her, like the way she calculates things in moments of silence or when she's thinking about things, when is so engaging. And I think she's always been good, but I think she really is, like, I'd love to see her play a detective in something like not a police detective per se, but like just like a detective of some sort in like a noir-esque story that maybe isn't based on a true story, because then you can kind of get a little bit more deeper or
Yeah.
seedier or darker in the tone and not feel guilty for exploiting, some of the true nature
Yes.
of this story. But this movie does do it a lot better than I think
Something
it
like,
would
yeah,
have been if it was directed by someone
Ryan
else or
Murphy.
if it was Ryan
Yeah.
Murphy,
Yeah, exactly. Thank you all for listening or watching. We really, really do appreciate it. Our TIFF content will still be trickling out over the last, or not the last, it was over the last couple months, but it will be trickling out over the next couple months in a little while as these kind of movies start coming out during festival season. But you can check out all of our other TIFF reviews. We have reviews up for How to Blow Up a Pipeline, The Greatest Beer Run Ever, Women Talking, bro, glass
Glass Onion, The
bros,
Fableman,
brother, Weird Al, the Yankovic story, weird, the Al Yankovic story, uh,
The Banshees of
Sheeran, Triangle of
Inisherin.
Sadness, Pearl, The Whale. So tons of TIFF reviews that you guys can go check out. And then as you know, the upcoming weeks, especially and into November and into December, you'll see even more. We also have, if you just don't care about TIFF stuff and want a little popcorn cinema, you can check out our review for Black Adam, Halloween Ends, which I thought was a great conversation with Eric, spoiler filled, about why we defended that movie when it's getting shit canned by everyone. Um,
Are we the contrarians?
we'll
Go and
see.
listen and find
Um,
out.
our review of Tar also very fun because it's we called it the Tar Wars because Eric and I were on very opposite sides of that movie, so that's a fun one. Go check that out. Rosalind, Amsterdam, Werewolf by Night, Don't Worry Darling, so tons of stuff. Go check out everything over on Untitled Movie Reviews. Our latest episodes of the Untitled Movie Podcast, you can check out our Black Adam Rocks Toronto. We saw The Rock in person. That was interesting. Go check out that episode. We also broke down the Super Mario Brothers trailer in episode 134, the Last of Us trailer in episode 133. And we should have another episode soon. Not sure when. It might be next week, where this week we might focus on a Black Adam spoiler cast. I think that's it. That's all to promote. One stop shop for everything. Head over to Letterbox, which is untitled_movies. And follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Martin. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene, including an interview with the Good Nurse director Tobias Lindholm, and on all the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Insane in the red mane. Insane in the red mane. I can't!